This is a hat that I use the Tubular 1x1 ribbing cast on for. So it's really beautiful. You can see that instead of beginning with a seam looking edge here, it's just rolled as if the ribbing comes out of nowhere. So that's what we will be doing today. So we're gonna start with both of our knitting needles and our crochet hook and our scrap yarn, which I'm using this fluorescent yarn. Hopefully you can see it well. First, we're gonna start by doing a slip knot and sticking that right on the crochet hook. So hold your crochet hook in your right hand with the working yarn, and then grab the tail and your two needles and put those in the back, and then the crochet hook in the front to make an X. So then we wrap the yarn around the back of the whole X and pull it through the slip knot. Then we continue. So wrapping the yarn around the whole back of the X, pull it through the loop. So you can see I have 2 stitches here. I'm going to continue to cast on like this until I have the number of stitches that I need. And then we will continue and start working with our actual working yarn. Now we'll start working with our actual working yarn, and we're only going to use the smaller needle now. So we can go ahead and pull out the larger needle. Just make sure to hold down your stitches so they don't fly off the needle. And bye-bye. All right, so it is a little tricky just because these are loose on the needle. And as you'll see, since we're working in this bulky yarn, these stitches are going to be tight that we add, and the ones on the needle are going to be loose. So be a little bit careful in this first setup round. So just leave a long enough tail to be able to sew it in at the end. And we're just going to follow the pattern of knit 1, yarn over all the way across. So knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and go across the whole needle like that. And what we're doing, that yarn over, is adding the other half of our stitches that we need for our final amount. Since we cast on the scrap yarn only half the amount of stitches that we needed. So our final stitch is the yarn over, which we can do now, but we're also going to double check that when we put this all together. So this is the beginning of the row. I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker on here just so I can see that clearly. You can tell anyway though, because your provisional cast on is there. And then we're going to go ahead and join it and start working in the magic loop. So to do that, what I like to do is just scoot it down so you're not in risk of them flying off, and make sure your provisional cast on is not twisted, and just find a spot that looks roughly half in your work and pull out the cable so that it's a loop. So this is our tail, and this is our working side. I've lost my yarn over, that's okay. We're gonna just get this arranged. So you want the working side in your right hand, and line up the provisional cast on so it's in the center and it's not twisted. So I can see there's a twist in it here. I'm gonna just make that twist go away. So, okay, there's no twist at this corner, which is what we want. And we're gonna just arrange it so There's no other twists happening. Stick that down there. So now it's not twisted, and I'm gonna scoot both sides onto the needle so I can work with it. So I just scoot it up till it's close to the tips, and this is just basic magic loop method that we're doing here. And it's tight because this yarn is really too fat for these needles, which is on purpose. But what you want to do is scoot it to the end so you can actually work with it. And then when it's doable like that, you're going to just join it by sticking the right hand needle into the first knit stitch of the other needle. But remember, we want our yarn over, which I lost during that process. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over. So starting our first round, here we go. All right, so we're going to knit and then yarn in front and then pop that next stitch off purlwise, yarn in back. Knit, yarn in front, pop the next stitch off purlwise, yarn in back. And what we're actually doing here is we're doing the knit row or the knit stitches of our yarn over. And I need to adjust this on my needle here. So we're doing the knit stitches of our yarn over, and we're going over the purl stitches. So we're doing the knit stitch, and then by bringing the yarn in front and popping off the next stitch, that's our purl stitch. We're just bringing that to the back and making the yarn go in front of it. So go ahead and continue this throughout until you get to your loop. And I'll show you what to do with it when you get to your loop. If you already know how to do the magic loop method, that's all I'm showing. So just go ahead and continue this till the end of the row. Now I'm just about at the loop, so I'll show you what to do here if you're not used to working in the magic loop method. Here's my last stitch. And then when you get to the loop, it becomes free, your other needle. And then you just want to go to about halfway on the other side. And in this case, we're going to go to the beginning of the round. And you just pull the cable through so that you can continue working, and I'll slide these stitches down. Again, it's tight here. This will loosen up as we go a little further in the next round. So now I've got my loop over here, and I also have room to free this up and work like so. So we will just continue. I just did my knit stitch, so I'll go around this one, and I'm going to continue to the end of this round, and then we will do the next row. Okay, I'm at the end of this round, and I want to show you something. So this is our last stitch. I'm slipping it and going around the purl. So I'm ending with the yarn in the back, and I'm going to just slip this off. So I wanted to show you, you can see this is loose. This sometimes happens when you're working in the round, and I'm just going to not care about it. So we're just going to ignore the fact that it's loose, because in my over 2 decades of knitting, I've never had that be a problem in this move. So we're going to move the needles around to start working here, and I've got my loop roughly midway through the working piece, and we're going to start on the next row here. I'm going to bring my stitch marker more visible. So I want to make sure that this is in the right spot. This should be going around the last stitch and be in the back, which it is. And now we're going to move on to the next row, which is going to be the opposite of what we just did. So we're going to be slipping the knit stitches and working the purl stitch. And in order to do that, we're going to have the yarn in back when we slip it. So it goes like this. Slip the first stitch, which is the knit stitch, bring the yarn to the front and work the purl. Yarn to the back, slip the knit stitch, yarn to the front, purl the purl stitch. So in the same way that we did before, we're now working the other part of the rib by bypassing the knit and working the purl. And this time we're bypassing the knit stitch with the yarn in the back to keep that knit stitch in the front. All right, we just finished our second row doing the purl stitches of the rib, and now is the fun part. Now we get to unzip our provisional cast on. So to do that, find the edge that does not have the knot. Here's the knot. Here's the end without the knot. And because I slipped the end through, I'm just going to pull the tail out. I'm going to make sure the work is on the cables and not the needles so it doesn't fly around. And I'm also going to pull the cable through, so I'm just working with this ring. So we're going to just pull this. And it's not the smoothest yarn, so it's going to be a little bumpy. I can see there's a little piece of fuzz. This will happen when you're working with fuzzy yarn, no problem. You can see how far you get if you just gently pull it, but you might have to help it along. And we're just going to keep pulling the end here. And we'll pull it along. Another way to pull it along, kind of satisfying, is to stretch it out a little bit. This is actually really great. Just make sure if you do it like this that your work is nowhere near the end of your needle so it doesn't come off. But this is a really easy way to move it along. Very satisfying. Yeah. Okay. Here we are near the end. And because I know, there goes my stitch marker, I better put that back on. I'm just going to get it in the stitch of my working yarn here. Because I know this is the end with the knot, that's going to be hard to pull through the rest of the stitches here. So I'm going to undo my slip knot, and now I'm going to pull it from this end all the way through. Ta-da! Now you have your 1x1 ribbing tubular cast on, and you can see it's going to be a smooth rolled edge on the brim of this hat. It does not look beautiful yet, but I promise you that it will once we get cruising. Now you're ready just to knit your regular 1x1 rib for as long as you need to, and it's going to look awesome.